Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds by nerds, I'm Nerdicus Dave, and today I'm joined by Megan Hardy. How are you doing today?
I am doing good. How are you?
Good. So you're coming right from teaching D&D essentially.
I am. I literally finished like 2 minutes ago.
That is awesome. So you do a program called Outschool where you actually run games of D&D and you do these would you call it summer camp workshops?
Yeah, well, some of them are close to standard classes. I do like 6 week campaigns. I do workshops, like summer camps for, and then I do ongoing campaigns, which are, your standard long term campaigns that can go months at a time.
And now, so just for anyone who doesn't know, what is Outschool?
Outschool is a online class platform for kids. They have classes on everything. You name it, they have it. Um, you could study sharks. You could do D&D classes. You can do cooking classes. If it's there, you have the opportunity to do it.
And you do D&D through Outschool.
Yes. Pretty much all I do, except for like one or two little other classes, is all D&D.
Oh, I didn't know you did other classes as
I
well.
teach one class on the history of like witchcraft trials in America, and I only do that by request. And it gets requested every so often. And I used to do like one on feudalism, but it's the D&D has taken up so much of my time to pretty much have pushed everything else out.
Okay. So when you first started Outschool, were you doing like these other programs or did you start with D&D?
I started with the others, and then I offered a D&D class thinking it might get a little bit of interest. And it took off really fast, really quick, and then it got a lot of interest.
Now, you've been doing this for several years now.
Mm-hmm. Over 2 years.
Okay. Okay. So now Outschool is supposed to be a educational program. So are there certain kind of like beats and things that you have to incorporate into your D&D sessions, or do you kind of have like free reign to do what you do whatever?
Somewhat free reign, but I think you want to go into it with an educational idea. Like, are you trying to build logic skills? Are you trying to build cooperation skills? Do you want to sometimes do math puzzles and throw that in there just for a little bit of fun? You want to have some educational beats in there. Just it's a, D&D is just such a great way to kind of backdoor learning. Um, and if you're, I mean, I like to do that for my students. So let's figure out a logic puzzle, or let's put together like maybe a little philosophical question here or there and really make them think it out. Um, and they're enhancing skills that would be useful in any other area, but they're doing it in a way they're playing a game, so they don't really realize.
You have to trick them into learning.
Kind of. I mean, it's the difference between sitting down and doing like a worksheet versus like doing kind of a fun real life math activity. You just, I think kids and adults are alike. We learn best when we're actually somewhat entertained with what we're doing.
No, I'll agree with that. I am for reading a new rule set, and it is boring and confusing. And I I just like, you know what? I think I just want to find the creator and be like, can you run this for us? Run us through a game. I'll learn that way.
Well, I mean, exactly. And I get kids who are like, I've read the books and I've read them, and I think I have an idea, but it's really hard and confusing for them. And then they get to playing and they're like, oh, I totally get this now. I understand what that's about. And I mean, a lot of times we apply such different rules for ourselves and kids. Like like you said, we learn through doing. Like adults, I want to play the game, but like your kids, like no, we have to learn this way and go through. And they're kind of the same. I mean, they want to have fun as they go.
So what are the age ranges that you work with?
Typically, I mean, I have students as old as 18 and as young as 8. Occasionally, I even get a 7-year-old in, but typically it's 9 to 14 is kind of 9 to 13 is my range.
Do you find there's like a sweet spot, or with the age, or kids are just all different and all over the place?
11-year-olds I have a lot of fun with. They're mature enough, but yet not so teenage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but no, I mean, a lot of it is you get kids that have come from, so like I'll get like an 8-year-old, but they've come from a role playing house, or they have like this is all really familiar to them. Or I get maybe a 13-year-old who's never played before and just really wants to hit something. So a lot of it does depend on the kid, but I do have a fun like 11 to 12-year-olds, just that age, their mindset, everything. I kind of it's fun.
I love that. I just get a 13-year-old. They want to hit stuff.
Hmm. I
uh,
mean, I could be jaded and like I mean I could say that's like my teen doesn't do that, but then my daughter does. So
yeah. So, what's the most like surprising thing that's ever come up in a game?
um, people really want to like the amazing amount of things that people want to befriend. Um, I have this encounter at the start of my flagship class, which is D&D Fun Adventure. But there's this encounter with skeletons, and like this one group is basically really lobbying to figure out a way to befriend the skeletons. And I like told them, they don't even have like a brain. They're not really going to understand what you're saying. And then they're like, well, that doesn't mean they can't be nice. And so they were lobbying every which way to make these skeletons like friends at some level. Um, Same thing as like I will put forth driders in front of people and like adult player drider battle time, kid player drider. Can we talk this out? Maybe we could help her. Maybe she's a benefit. Maybe she's a nice drider. Have we ever thought about this? And it's just, you know, that the most let's see, the most surprising thing I ever um I had a player ask if they could use a sharpened baguette as a weapon.
How'd that go?
Not well, but they got to try it.
Did
And I
they?
had another player every session. They were like, "Can we find squirrels? Can I look through the forest for squirrels?" And I'm like, "Okay, I'm not sure what the goal here is, but we would stop and do that." And all the players were laughing. They were friends. We found out later that they were planning a secret to try to turn the squirrels rabid and form a rabid squirrel army to unleash on the villain at the last minute. So then at the very last session, like, could we say the squirrels have rabies? And I was like,
Oh boy. Well, you know what? They needed a wizard with contagion, and they should have tried giving them rabies that way.
it would have been genius.
Oh man. Yeah, kids can be like that, for sure. Um you said you just came from a workshop where you're doing world building.
Hmm. It's a class on how to homebrew. So I give them a map and we work together to put together cities, and then we create villains and heroes in the world, and then we finally do storylines associated with that. They really, really like their demons in this group. We had a couple of demon cities. Um, but no, they have a lot of fun with it and they have all these ideas, and they get really excited. I think sometimes with kids, we don't listen to them so much as an adults. And so when they get to like really let that creativity go out, like come out of them, they get really into it and more involved than maybe adults in like world building. Like I kind of wanted to play in their world and then I was kind of scared to do so.
It does sound a little dark. I mean, three cities of demon worshippers, and you also mentioned, what was it, Knowlton Village or Knoll
No,
Village?
Null Village, which is next to Null Cave, where they keep trapped nulls. That was a group decision. They have the Demogorgon Sea, and they also came up with I can't remember, the Demon Lord Orcus has a town.
It does sound like a terrible place to live.
It's not great. Um,
Yeah.
Kids are dark though. Like you think like I mean, I've played with adults and I've run a lot of kid games. Adults don't have anything on a group of like 13-year-olds.
Yeah, yeah. You and when you say a lot, Can you kind of elaborate on what a lot is to people? Because I think your definition of a lot might be different than other people's.
Yeah, I run about 40 to 50 classes a week. So that's about 40 to 50 games. Um, I'm doing over 60 hours a week usually. It's a lot, especially with COVID. Demand went up for at-home activities, and didn't really go down, which is good and can be a little overwhelming, but it's fun. But kids are getting online and they're playing and they're realizing this is a resource. So yeah, I run a lot of games. I have some kids that I'll see about 4 to 5 times a week. So like we'll just take everything.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So so how long are the sessions?
Typically between an hour and 20 minutes to an hour and 30 minutes. I have discovered that 90 minutes tends to be the limit for kids. They just they reach a point where they get a little distracted, especially on the younger age, where they get a little distracted. Maybe they start kind of antsy. And then also that kind of gives an out if tensions start to run a little high because they can. Um, I've had to instill rules like no player versus player violence and don't kill NPCs without cause and things like that.
I've
Uh,
got some adult players that could use those rules.
I would love to do it. I mean, adult players will actually give you more static for that. Kid players are like, okay, that's the rules. We go with it.
Yeah.
Um,
So
kids are. I say, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, like, so do you? So that just seems short to me, an hour and 20 minutes. So, how much will you typically be able to pack into that time, and for how many players?
6 players. Um, and I actually can pack in a good amount because I have a flow to it. I mean, when I first started, it might have been a little bit tricky, but I can get a good amount. And you have to think of it like, especially for the 6 week courses, not so much like with the campaign as a one shot broken down into 6 parts. So you're really only going for, 9 hours max. That's kind of just a long one shot for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think of it like that, um, and then for like ongoing campaigns, they can make a lot of progress. Um, I think we think of it that way, and I've seen a couple because there are other D&D instructors on our school that like maybe put classes back to back to extend them,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fine. They can totally do that. My thought process also is that kids tend to be really scheduled and a 2 hour block or a 3 hour block for kids to get together at one time is tricky for parents
Hmm.
too. Typically, like you have to like we have this activity to do and we're going straight into another class to do this, and you kind of have to think about the scheduling part of it too. But just especially for the younger ages, I have just there is a limit to how much they can process at once, so
That
they need breaks and stopping and all of that, and it just kind of works out better.
that makes sense. So what does that structure look like of when you're so when you're running an hour and 20 minutes?
We get right to it. I mean, lately it's been a little less getting right to it because I found that kids need to talk. Like they're going through some times right now.
Mm.
So the first 5 minutes is usually just people kind of talking about what's on their minds and kind of sharing. These kids become really close and tight with each other really quick. And a lot of them, this is like their socialization. And so I want to give them a little bit of time just to kind of say, hey, I've had a rough week or all of that. They'll talk things out sometimes. Um, and then we get kind of right to it. I give them discussion posts where they can comment and talk back and forth throughout the course of the week on what they want to be doing. So usually they have an idea where they're going. And because I've done it so much, I can kind of go from point A to point B. Like we kind of get there. We kind of focus on, I have one goal per session usually, and that's kind of what I'm focused on getting through. And they'll go with it. Some groups move slower. And when they do, I'll add another session in because I want to give them the full thing. Some groups move incredibly fast. It just kind of depends on the dynamics of it all.
Depends on how many squirrels they want to acquire along the way.
Some groups will debate and talk things out, but eventually you just like, okay, I go via democracy rules. So we take a class vote, and this is what we're doing. So discussion can't go an hour into, this is what I want to do.
Since you typically have 6 players, are you the tiebreaker?
Um, I have found that me being a tiebreaker is a bad thing because then people think I'm showing favoritism. I let the dice be the tiebreaker.
That makes sense.
Dice rule all.
Yeah.
I do a lot of dice rolling for students when it comes to treasure and tiebreakers and um, anything that really comes of consequence that like could make people upset or not. I let my rolls dictate because I have found that kids will fudge a lot of dice rolls.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a thing at all. No. So what do you use for dice rolling?
I go on Roll20. The kids aren't on Roll20. Once again, I know there's some out school teachers that will have kids on there. I try not to. It's not a site everybody's comfortable using. It can be a little tricky at times, and I don't want to have the parents sign up for more things that they're already doing. But I use it for backdrops for maps, and I screen share via Zoom. And so I'll use the online dice roller. And kids typically don't like it when I roll for them because I roll really badly.
Yeah.
And they go from getting like nothing but like 18 and above to actually like 1 and 5 and 6. But I had a class yesterday where everybody rolled 21 on initiative, and I mean everybody. At some point, I was just like, okay, somebody's got to come a little clean on this one.
Yeah. So do they typically roll real dice, or are they using virtual dice as well?
Some of them have real dice. Most of them have real dice, and some of them use virtual dice rollers. They get really excited when they get their first set of dice, though. They usually they don't start off with dice. Usually they'll do like a virtual roller, and like third session they're like, I got my dice in, and they're going to show each other all their dice, and it becomes a big deal.
Yeah. So how long before they become cheaters?
I have one student who the entire like we've been doing Storm King's Thunder forever. Like this class, they actually they've created their own Kraken cult. One of my students actually sent me in a hat that his mom made of a Kraken based off of this because he was having so much fun with it. That I wore last night in class. But in this class, there was one student who, like, for the longest time, didn't get anything below a 19, like, for months. And we're just all like, so eventually for the class, I started rolling for them, and then mysteriously their balance went down a little bit.
Yeah. Yes. I get, that is kind of tough. I mean, that's tough with adults sometimes. You're just like, and what are you going to do? Most of the time, it's not even worth fighting over. It's just like, I don't know.
You can't accuse them of cheating because, A, what if they aren't? And B, they're kids and they're kind of adjusting, and you don't want to turn the other kids against them because that kind of feels like it can become a group gang on thing, and I don't really want to do that. So what I try to do is if I suspect it and it's really becoming an issue, then I'll implement it for everybody and say, hey, let's just try this and let me do it for everybody. I try not to single anybody out so feelings don't get hurt because you could be wrong. It could just be like how the kids are rolling the dice too. Like some kids just drop and they think that's a dice roll. I've seen my daughter do that a lot where she will just like drop the die. I'm like, oh, look, I got a 20 again. I'm like, well, it didn't actually roll.
You more or less placed it on the 20 from up here. Yeah. I mean, that's always going to be a thing. I would say probably one of the downsides to being, shorter sessions, it's kind of harder to like illustrate more of the fun things that can happen when things go wrong.
Yeah, and yes and no. You just have to find those moments and really make the most of them. And kids will make things go wrong really easy, so they kind of work for you.
Yeah, that's true. Do you use crit fumbles?
Yes, definitely. Natural ones, something happens. But I had a student. Oh, this was a while back. I have a scene where a hag is trying to get them to eat pastry because she's trying to knock them out because she's working for the evil boss and trying to delay them getting to where they're going. And one of the players said like their character's flaw was they can't resist sweets. So he took a bite of the pastry, passed out. And they woke up, didn't remember, took a bite of the pastry, passed out. And it was like 5 rounds of this, but everybody was going into it. because they thought it was the funniest thing ever. So like they're like, can I grapple him to cover his mouth, or something of that nature? Or in another class, we had a battle, and our warlock cast darkness, as they tend to do, right in the center of battle
Yeah.
where nobody could see. And then our druid is trying to stop them from doing spells. So he, or not stop them doing spells, was trying to stop them from something. I can't remember what it was, but he decided warding wind was a really good idea. Well, warding wind deafens. So
Yeah.
the group was blind and deaf. They were like, literally, can I feel the ground to see if I've knocked him down?
Mhm.
Because nobody knew the battle had actually ended except for the warlock, who was mad over the warding wind, so he wouldn't tell them.
Oh.
So they're like literally trying to feel around if they were, finishing up combat. And that was one of the things that was like really like that's kind of playing into the errors and things can go wrong. And that was almost a full session, but like they are still laughing about it. It happened several weeks ago and is still getting brought up and has made its way like to other classes where they're in, where they're mentioning it. So things like that, you just make the most of those moments.
So, Kamo wants to know how do you adapt the game for kids, less math or anything?
Um, how do I what?
How do you adapt the game for kids?
You don't adapt it too much, actually. Um, they're a lot smarter than the credit we give them for. Like they know what they are doing. Um, you adjust certain things. Um, you sometimes want to be less graphic on things. Um, make sure they get the concepts more than the actual. So I want to make sure they understand the concepts of what they're doing first, more so than the math, and the math comes secondary. If they don't understand why the modifier matters, then the math to it is not going to matter as much. So I kind of do it step by step, and a lot of it depends on the individual child too. So some 12-year-olds will get everything like this really fast, they understand it. Others don't. A lot of times, what will happen is they'll help each other because they come into my class at different levels, and they will kind of just guide each other through the process. So a lot of times learning is best when they're going through it. And it's really kind of fun to watch this new player has never played before and is really nervous and really shy and tries to stay off camera. By the final session is asked on camera asking for all this advice, and they're working for a team, and like they're like, oh, let's play together next time. And so a lot of times it's not so much as me as them, but I try not to like scale it down too much for them. I try to keep the mechanics in play as much as I can, but just kind of work to kind of build a layer level so they can kind of get it.
Now, you've been doing this for a while. I can see you've gotten tons of parent feedback. Do you have any stories like where the kids are now excelling in other areas because they've been doing these classes?
The biggest stories I have are social.
Mm.
Um, the I've had a lot of kids that their parents are okay. They're not going to talk and they're not going to engage, and just be prepared for that. And then like 3 months later, they just started a D&D club, and they're running their first game for friends. Or I had one student who he would say like, I don't have friends outside of this. So those friends connected with him, and they now have their own Discord channels really grown, and they connect. A lot of it is writing too. I have students who say they hate to write, they normally wouldn't, and now they're writing like 3-page backstories, or I can't get them to read, but now they're holding up this book and like, look, I'm going to read this entire monster manual and have it down pat. When it's something we're interested in, we will go the extra mile, and this game tends to take a hold of people and kids. So activities they may not normally do, they're willing to do full force. I get a lot of people messaging me their art and things like that. So they'll do a lot of their downtime is spent around the game they're playing versus like other things their parents like video games and that type of thing. So not that there's anything wrong with that, because like video games in my family are huge. So
So how much role playing do the kids actually engage in?
A lot. Kids tend to do nothing but role play if given a chance. Like they get really into their characters. I get a lot of voices, which is better than me because I am not always great at my voices. Um, they will get really into it, and then I get like kids worried about it too. So I have one kid who is like, "Okay, I really want to stab him right now," and then immediately typing in the group chat, "Please don't worry, I don't ever do this in real life. I'm really sorry." And I'm like, we totally get it, but they get into the role play massively. They'll have these ideas for characters, and they want to be that character, and they are probably more role play than adults. Even battle is pretty much primarily role play.
Yeah, yeah. We just started a game on the channel where it's like 3 adults and 4 teens, and my one nephew's in the game, and he's like super quiet, doesn't talk at all until he starts role playing. And it's like a Jekyll and Hyde scenario. So it's definitely a cool thing to see kids coming out of the show like that, and maybe I don't know if it's the game or the playing of another persona that allows them to open up, but it is definitely cool to see. So, do you? What is the longest running game that you've had?
Ooh. Um, I have a water deep game. It started off as water deep. It's morphed into something completely its own at this point. Um, it's not. It was supposed to be like after they did Dragon Heist, kind of more encounters, and we were talking about doing Dungeons and Mad Mage, but they weren't really a big fan of the dungeons, so we kind of started doing some homebrew one shots they came up with, and then they developed this whole other story, and now they find themselves in Barovia, not necessarily doing Curse of Strahd, but in that land because they wanted to investigate it. But it's just like this really cool, fun group, and they come up with some of the most bizarre character ideas I've ever seen, and their characters change a lot over time, but they have a lot of fun together. And they, once again, they also created like a Discord group for each other to talk during. It's really active. I probably get about half a dozen messages from them every week about character requests, but they have like really grown together, and they and it's a group of kids that I say wouldn't always fit together normally, but they really, really enjoy it. And they are really invested in each other's backstories and all of that. And they've probably been going since last September.
Okay, so they're coming up on a year.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Now, are most of your students primarily in the U.S.?
Um, I would say majority US. I get a lot of English, a lot of Australian. I get some students from India. Um, I have I've had students from I think 15 or so different countries over time, but I would say the majority are US and Canadian. But I do get a lot of students from overseas as well.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the cool things in general about gaming online is the interaction with people all over the world, which you normally wouldn't get at your home table. Um, I think for a while, I don't know if you still are. Are you using D&D Beyond?
I am, and it's an amazing resource, and they have been like the coolest people ever. He gave me so my students when they're in my class, they have actually access to all the books and stuff through a campaign link.
Mm-hmm.
So during that 6 weeks, they can really read and learn and investigate all of it. And those guys are just like incredibly supportive of education and kids and all of that. And so they were really cool making sure I had that resource for my students available.
It also makes like the character creation process so much easier.
It really is, and it's really fun. Um, and then I build up my NPCs for games on there. I probably have like 100 NPCs at any given time because I like to come up with NPC character sheets. So, but yeah, if I look at my campaigns, it's hilarious just looking at the characters they've come up with when they have full access to everything. There are so many Eric Rocca. Like that's the new thing. It used to be Dragonborn. Now it's slowly becoming Eric Rocca is the new thing that they all want to be.
Well, we'll see we'll see if that stays the same with the new books coming out or
Oh,
not.
well, I know the lion thing is like I'm trying to remember the name of the lion race,
Leonin.
but they like I know that's going to be really really big because and then also like occasionally I will home brew races for students. Um, and I have to give props for my husband for this because he usually is the one that actually comes up with the stats for them.
Mm-hmm.
But I had one student who's like, I want to be a mouse. Is there a mouse race? And I'm like, well, there's not really a playable mouse race, but I want to be a mouse. So we talked about it back and forth, and my husband and I worked, and we came up with a playable mouse race that could work. Um, I don't like to say my DMing philosophy, and especially think with kids, this is important to say no. I mean, it shouldn't be focused on the no, but how do we do this? And if we come to a point where it can't be done, then that's fine. But we want to explore every option because so often, especially right now, kids have such little control, and even in a world of imagination, it can feel like they're limited. So as many times as we can give them full options, I try to do that and let them really take control of these characters and make them theirs.
Elfbait says I've changed halflings into mouselings for a campaign.
Hmm.
Uh,
I mean, I think we did something where we altered like we were using like gnome
yeah,
stats and kind of altered it a little bit, something like that. I'm trying to remember, but I've done that. There's somebody who was a red panda. Somebody wanted to be a playable drider. Somebody wanted to be a awakened velociraptor. But we try to make that happen, or I do, and with help.
well, sure, why not? Velociraptors can open doors, so good enough. So we, in the game that we're playing, it's like all custom races, and one of the kids was walking my son through making their character in Roll20, and in the time it took them to kind of do that. I had entered like the 4 homebrew races in the D&D Beyond and sent them a link. And my son was like, oh, this is so much easier. He spent like 35 minutes trying to figure out how to make a character in Roll20. But in D&D Beyond, he's like, I made it in 3 minutes.
Roll20 is not user friendly at times. I'm not trying to bash it. I love it to play on it myself. But if you're a kid just getting into it, I don't always feel like that's the best place to start. And I've had a few parents say, my kid tried to do it on there and they got really frustrated. So please tell me we don't have to log in.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's a great resource for adults and it's really cool and I love it. But I think if you're just starting, its character creation process is kind of complicated.
Yeah, I mean, most of the virtual tabletops, I feel like it's like that as well. Compared to on D&D Beyond, it's like you just a couple clicks and it just seems like you have a character.
And there is a new app, and I'm trying to remember it because I saw it recently that lets you connect your D&D Beyond character to Roll20.
Yes.
So you can just upload from there.
Beyond 20.
So I think that's a better solution if you really want to do that. And I'm not trying to be like, because I'm clearly not promotional, but I'm just saying from a perspective of I know our kids, like how they think and ease of use. I really think D&D Beyond is the best place, easiest online option for kids for character creation that I have come across. And it's very visual, and I think that's part of it. You can kind of see the options. You can click and get really good descriptions of what they are. And then also just sometimes sitting down with a parent who knows what they're doing is really fun, and it's a really bonding experience of going over character creation and like what they want to be. I know when I'm running games for my kids or something like that, I always like their favorite moment is sitting down with their dad and getting the character ready before I start. And so if you have the knowledge, sitting down with your kids and coming up with it is really fun.
Yeah, that the app, it's a Google extension, a Chrome extension. It's called Beyond 20. And we play an offline game on Saturday mornings, and I use that as well as for the game we just started. We're using it. It can be a little glitchy sometimes, but for the most part, it runs really well, and it's a lot easier than having to find things over on on the virtual tabletop. It's just easier to click on your character sheet and be like, oh, now it's doing the thing I want it to do. So I've used it to circumvent having to learn more stuff. So I think that's pretty great. So what classes do you have coming up, or what workshops do you have coming up?
I'm in the middle of scheduling. I don't have that much available right this second. I'm kind of booked up mainly through August, but I'm starting to get the next schedule going. My fun adventure class is sort of like I call it my flagship class. Um, it's kind of it's the 6 week introductory sort of one shot for kids. I think it's a really fun starting point for them. It's been really popular and kind of been how I've been able to kind of start my success, I guess. So I'm going to be adding a lot more of those. I do some long-term campaigns. I do a couple of homebrew ones I came up with. What's called Horror and Faerun. I have another one I came up with, Down with Nobles. I found the kids really, really enjoy going up against nobles. It's just a thing. Universally, they just like taking them down. And then just a few other like Waterdeep. I do a Storm King's Thunder. And then on top of that, I have some other like 6 week classes that I've done. I have a second part and a third part to the Fun Adventure. I came up with a Sleepy Hollow crossover thing that I've done that kids seem to really like. It's like more of a mystery. And I also have one set in Eberron. And so I'm going to be adding new sections of all of that probably within the next week or so, starting towards fall. Like I said, just been really busy and I can't complain at all. It's just, but up through August, I'm pretty much booked solid. But after that, I'm kind of going forward towards the fall. I'm really excited and probably will come up with a few more. I like coming up with like spooky Halloween things because that's just me.
I love the fact that some of your classes are based around being subversive to the man and beginning class warfare early.
Well, I didn't really like, I just found that like kids will do that. Like I have another one called Trouble of Nobles. It's a summer camp. It's like a 3 session, just a little mini one shot. And it's basically, they have to like, there's a power struggle with nobles and Waterdeep, and it's all centered around this book that they have to get from one noble to kind of balance things out and stop this kind of going. And this last session that ended last week ended with them pitting two nobles against each other and demanding they fight. And I'm just like, but yeah, they just naturally, if you say someone's a noble, like they just naturally, most kids will put in their head, I do not like this person. And even the kids that choose a noble background are like, I'm a noble, but not like other nobles.
Yeah, that's funny. They have a disclaimer.
Pretty much.
Brian Smith, I cannot wait for my daughters to be old enough to play D&D with me. A few of my friends have daughters too, and would love to get them all in a game together. I will say, I've got 2 kids, and one of them plays, and the other one doesn't. And even the one that does play now, the first attempt was a failure. So, you know what? It would be nice if your kids play with you, but it may or may not happen, is my experience.
My son doesn't really like playing too much, and especially with us. My daughter can do it nonstop. So, yeah. I mean, it's just by the kid. And something he said, like, it used to be that this was like kind of an assumed male thing. I will say that the girls in my classes and numbers keep going up and up, to the point where I've had a few classes that have been girl only. Just that it's just happened that way. So get your daughters going on it. It's it's just kind of fun seeing them kind of intermingle and like really go for it.
Now, I had one friend that his method of theory was like, you put all of your gaming stuff on the top shelf and kind of like tell your kids, this isn't really for you. And that was his method of getting his kids into gaming.
I think it's smart because like, I think because I do it for a living, that like, especially like for my teenager, maybe it's not cool. Like, because like it's become the parent thing. But no, I mean, I just think exposing your kids to what your interests are, it's just like anything else. Some they're gonna like and some they're not gonna like, and just talk to them and like let them observe a game as you're playing. Play in front of your kids just some, and I guarantee you, it's kind of like they'll just start coming over and just whispering about what you're doing and having some insight into things. Just be prepared when you play with your kids. It can get like brutal, and you might see sides of kids you didn't see before,
Yeah.
and that's part of it. You just discover things, and like I said, kids. I've told you this before. Kids can go a little dark. So,
Alfie says my teens won't play with me, but they do play in my adult son's game.
I think we just, as parents, automatically become uncool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that is definitely part of it. Uh, my son is more likely to play uh, in Ted's games than my games, you know, because it's the cool uncle, not dad or whatever. But yeah, so I mean, so that was actually tough getting him, and he's like very casual, so he's like in and out of games. I was kind of surprised when he agreed to play in the game that we just started online, uh, which uh, which is based off of a board game called Daubers, and the person that made the game is running it for us. But the Daubers are like these kind of like gnome type characters, and the playable races are gnome, or not the gnomes, but the Daubers rats. It's not like a rat person. I think they're actually just rats, and goblins, but not like D&D goblins. More like kind of like folklore goblins, and like the tallest character is like 18 inches. The rats are considered like kind of like buff in that world.
That'd be cool. I want to do that.
Yeah.
Well, one of the games that we used to get our kids into it was Mice and Mystics.
Okay.
Um, and that's I mean, it's a structure, it's a little bit more structured. You have a board game set up, but it is role play and it has Dungeons and Dragons elements to it. And you play as mice trying to, you know, go through the castle and all of that. And it's kind of fun. So that's a kind of a good entry point too.
I mean, I feel like there's a lot of games like that now. Pugmire, Mouse Guard. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you've got Humblewood. Although I hear Mouse Guard, I've seen it, and it comes in a box. It's not that big, but it is hefty. It is dense, and it's. I have not read through it, but it is not rules light. That's for sure. It's fairly complex. So I don't know. Someone had mentioned about getting their kids into it. I want to say, No Thank You Evil is like a great game to use for younger kids because there's a lot of resource management with it, and it uses chits. So even if the child isn't great at math, they can visually see their pile diminishing, and they can understand that. Ted had experimented with that a little bit with his kids. Have you had a chance to check that out at all?
No, but now I kind of want to.
It's good. It's fun. Like it's everybody gets a companion or pet.
Oh, well, that would be big because that's like that's probably the number one thing I've noticed when teaching kids is everything becomes a companion and pet.
Yeah, so they
They
built that right in.
they go nuts over it. I This is what I have learned, and like, the kids will tend to want to attack things they shouldn't and tame things they shouldn't, and they'll flip those around. So the thing that we would all be like, that evil giant spider is coming at me, it's going to attack me. No, that's going to be my new friend and mount.
Yeah.
And that villager who's giving me directions, they clearly have a secret motive that I have to like undercover, and they're clearly evil. So it's kind of things get flipped over like that. It's just somewhat amusing. But yeah, I have an encounter with giant spiders in my fun adventures class, and 90% of the time they end up with pet giant spiders.
Yeah.
It's just something I had a dinosaur themed campaign, and I still run it every so often, but I discovered that pretty much it was just kids wanting to tame dinosaurs. Like, it was supposed to be a big battle of a T-Rex, but nope. They just want to tame dinosaurs. Um, Kids like it's that. I mean, it's that fantasy kind of element of them. Like, ooh, I could have that as a real pet, and they're very real to them. Like they'll come up with names and all of this, and they'll be like, okay, where's my pseudo dragon on the map? Where is he? What's he doing right now? Or my downtime, I'm playing fetch with this creature that I just discovered. Um, I had a class where one of the characters literally they died, so they came up with a new character, and we were discussing it, and the only thing they cared about was could their pet transfer over to their new character. And as long as they had that, they didn't care that they died, they didn't care they lost everything. As long as they could keep that animal, they were fine.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that. I've seen women players too that do the same kind of thing. I've noticed with like trying to befriend things that you shouldn't befriend in my games anyway. And I the only difference is like between the women and the kids is like the women kind of go into it knowing it's going to turn out bad, but they don't care. And I don't think that where the kids, I don't think they don't think that way. They're just like, oh, we're going to make a new friend.
Well, yeah, and then part of it also is I tend to make things less scary at times. So you get the occasional like 9 year old or 10 year old that can't look at a picture of something that's like really like um so skeletons. My first combat I usually run is with skeletons. So it's an easy combat. They can kind of get a good feel for the characters. But there are kids who are like, that's really spooky and scary. So
Hmm.
one thing I've done is kind of joke around and say, oh, I name all my undead creatures Bobs. I call them the Bob Squad.
Hmm.
Once you kind of do that and take the humor and put in it, they're not really afraid. But it's had the counter effect where they're like, we have to get Bobs. We have to protect the Bobs. So now like that they have an identity, they want to bring them in. Or the same thing with like spiders. Like I'll find a cute, really adorable spider picture of like this dancing spider and use it instead if a kid's really scared, and then it becomes something they want to protect. But you have to also remember that about kids is you have to be careful that they can get really freaked out by things and they won't tell you ahead of time. And then I've like had students that like I put a picture on and they'll cover their eyes, so I'll try to find kind of a cute substitute for it, and then it becomes something more likable and it takes hold, and the rest of the students usually go for it because they think it's funny, and it just becomes a thing.
Lucas used Lucas the spider.
Yeah.
It's a it's a big thing in Ted's house. I didn't know what it was until they showed me, but there's this cute animated spider.
But yeah, you mean they love these things. I had one group that was, oh, was it they? I put a displacer beast out for them, and they're like, "So what is this?" So I showed them a picture, and again, so what you're saying is it's a kitty cat. I'm like, "Well, no." And they're like, "But no, you're saying it's a cat." So they're like, "But we could animal hand." I'm like, "No, not exact." But I mean, even a hellhound, you have to really, really explain to them why they can't animal handle that because
Yeah.
they really want to.
Because you're basically trying to animal handle your stove with a bad attitude.
Well, exactly. Like some things you just can't, but they will lobby. I mean, they will really put effort into this.
Yeah, yeah, no, I've definitely seen that happen in a few games. Uh, so what is your process for shooting that down? Like, do you let them try and just like let bad have bad things happen, or do you try to explain like, well, yes, it looks like a dog, but it's from hell, and everything in hell is there because they're bad.
I explain the process of how they became hellhounds, and once you usually do that, they're cool with it. Basically, this trick is making them think of them as bad people instead of dogs. The minute they think they're like their souls or things like that, they're like, oh, okay. They have to disassociate it from an animal.
Yeah,
Animals good, people bad. That is literally like kind of what you start to sense with a lot of the kid D&D players. And so you have to kind of remove it out from the animal world a little bit. They just see dog.
right.
But and that's the thing. You'll come up with an encounter that you think is horrifying or scary or is going to be really intense, and they will flip it on the head. And you just have to be prepared for that. And if you're DMing kids, I think that's the one thing that you have to be is you have to be really flexible to go with the flow of it. You can't hold on to your ideas of the way the story's going to go too much. And DMing kids is a lot different than DMing adults, and you just have to be a lot more flexible with it. and understand that they like kids' feelings can get hurt very easily. So we have to be careful how we word things and how we approach it. A lot of times, just asking them why they want to do something is enough to get them not to, because then you're hearing them out and then you can address that issue. But just saying a hard no on something, they'll get really frustrated really easy. And I think that goes back to what I was saying is the kids don't always get hurt. And they want an area where they can be kind of really heard out and they're like at least get a chance to explain themselves.
Do you have parents that want to jump into your games?
Yes. I've had parents message me about DMing them afterwards. Um, I've had a I've had parents, sit in and I could hear them give comments. I hear a lot of laughter sometimes going on in the background over what their kids are doing. But yeah, I mean, parents are there typically, so it's a thing. I've occasionally had a parent try to even say, no, we should do that. I'm like, no, you got to let the kid play. But
Yeah.
sometimes it can be a little too much.
Mm. So Brian wants to know: have you developed any mechanisms to deal with player kid who might be making the game less fun for others, like a timeout or something?
One thing is, before we start, I always make it clear that everybody gets a voice. You kind of want to keep an eye because there are kids that will drown other kids out given any chance. You also get kids that think they know the game inside and out and like they have all the answers. A lot of times it's literally muting somebody and saying, "Okay, you've had your chance to speak. Somebody else gets to talk now." We sometimes even have to take turn orders and talking and roll initiative for talking for some things. A lot of it is recognizing the kids that aren't engaging and pulling them forward. So being like, "Okay, let's just hear what this person has to say and make sure they're getting heard," because the bigger concern usually isn't the person that's talking too much, it's the person talking too little because they feel they can't voice their opinions. And also just kind of making sure that we use appropriate language, that we separate characters from players. I will immediately mute a student if I feel like they're picking on somebody or like, so maybe you think that idea isn't good, but so you're calling it like a dumb idea and things like that. We have to kind of watch the language like that. Um, but a lot of it is trying to just making sure everybody gets an equal voice. And when you have that, I mean, I wish I could do it at an adult game sometimes because you
Hmm.
get those players who are like, just like, I am going to dominate every scene and I'm going to be the star of the show. But I mean, the fact that we do it online via Zoom, mute is a friend, and it's my job, and that's why I'm there to juggle it and making sure everybody gets a voice, and really to kind of, in a very polite way, tell the kids that they may not know as much as they do, and that they kind of need to remember that we're all at different levels. And sometimes, I mean, sometimes I will throw something at a kid that I know is like constantly saying I can handle this, look how tough I am, that I know is going to be a little tougher for that particular character, just as an illustration that everybody, no one is the best and no one is better than everybody else and no one is superior and we all should be kind of heard. um, we just have to be really thoughtful, and that's what these classes can serve to do.
So, how do the kids handle being charmed or mind controlled?
They love it. That's what I've discovered. They actually really enjoy it. They go to town playing on it. um, they will lean into that so hard, um, because it gives them a chance to do different things. And like I had one character who was charmed, and he's like, "I'm going to jump in front of her and stop this arrow from hitting her because she is my new best friend." Um, Even when they're put to sleep, like they tend to have fun with it. They'll mumble things in their sleep and things like that. I think that's one thing that we can be worried the kids are going to have a negative reaction to something negative happening, but typically they actually go for it full force. And they are like, the best thing is polymorph. I use polymorph spells probably more than I should because kids absolutely love them. They can cause they can cause a wrench in a battle, but they don't actually physically hurt the character a lot of the times, and it's just um. But they will go to town, and you put like I use this cute dog picture, like you got polymorphed into this puppy, and they think like that is the best thing that's ever happened to them. Like I had one student who like got unpolymorphed. He goes, "No, I want to go back to living as a frog. I was happier then." It's just like things like that. Um, and I am looking at the chat. Inspiration. I don't typically do inspiration, but that's mainly because of the time limit I'm with and certain mechanics I have to be kind of. Um, but for long term campaigns, I tend to. If it's like a short campaign, no. If it's a long term, I'll tend to do it.
Yeah, so I must be tapping to my into my inner child whenever I get charmed. I'm actually disappointed sometimes when I don't, because I just want to wreak havoc on the party. I hate when players kind of like try and metagame their way out of that instead of just leading into it. So I just like to. I think in one of the last campaigns that we ran was pretty high level, and I was hoping to get the Steel Wind strike the party. Didn't happen though. A couple of my campaigns, one of I found the most devastating thing to the party was one of charming their heavy hitters, which typically.
Well, it's a good mechanism also because a lot of times it's the heavy hitters. When you get like the paladins and stuff, especially for the kids, they tend to get really like, you cannot touch me. I am golden.
Mm,
Like, look at all this damage I can do, and I can do all of this. And a spell like that can really kind of, I don't want to say humble, but it can kind of equal out the playing field a little bit more. Like, oh, I am a magic user, but I can do this now, and I'm a little bit better at these saves than you. And also, it's just kind of fun for the party to kind of have that moment. But I mean, I like doing that stuff. I think kids like it too. It's a lot better than sometimes just damage and massive amounts of damage because they really have to deal with like an effect.
yeah,
I feel.
but it creates an obstacle too that the best solution isn't really to beat it down, right? Like sure, like you could all jump on the paladin and beat him to 0 hit points, so he's not a problem anymore. But in the long run, it doesn't really help your party. So like, is there a better way to solve this problem?
Oh yeah, and there's always like that's just and like I said, anytime you can give a kid a chance to role play a little bit more, they'll have fun with it more. They do like combat. Don't get me wrong. They love hitting things and doing lots of damage, and they will compare notes on it. But if you can kind of blend that with role play a whole lot, which is like the standard of D&D anyways. But I think with kids, like we sometimes had they like ooh they like have we think they have that video game mentality of like I just like to hit, or I just want to do that, and they really do like the other part of it just as much, if not more.
Yeah, I find like two things seem to come up a lot with younger players, and that is one, like they like to switch out their characters, and two is they like to steal.
Um, if you ever do is like with Zoom, you have this chat feature, and you can privately message. And I had an ongoing campaign where I had literally 5 students at once messaging me privately if they could steal from each other. Now they all knew each other in real life, so it like
Yeah.
wasn't like the end, but it was like, could I steal from this person? Could I steal from that person? And like at some point, it was like you guys are going. This isn't going to work out very well.
Somebody's gonna get angry at some point. I mean, the last game we were in, like we were trying to solve a problem because there's like this commotion that was happening in town, and one of the players was like, "I want to use sleight of hand to try and get his pouch." What was in his pouch, and I was like, "Okay, yes, always." So we are up on the time. It's parting words before we head on out.
Whether it is with me or somebody else or at your home table, get kids playing because it's a lot of fun. And sometimes I get stressed, but honestly, I love what I do. And I would be lying if I said otherwise. And it's just really fun using a game, really, to kind of see kids' minds develop and where they'll go from where they begin to where they end and all of that. It's worth it. And you never know till you approach your kids if they're interested in it. So try to include them in your role play if you can, because I think it's worth it.
Just remember, have your NPCs hide their valuables.
And everything else, like
Yeah,
especially their pets.
especially their pets. So until next time, stay nerdy.
Thank you.